New York City woke beneath a cold drizzle that morning, its skyline hidden behind a blur of gray. Inside the federal courthouse on Pearl Street, Judge Veronica Hale was already at her bench, her black robe pressed and her notes stacked in perfect symmetry. For 30 years, she had built a reputation for precision, never a minute late, never a ruling delayed. To her clerks and colleagues, she wasn't just a judge. She was the embodiment of law and order. At exactly 8:30 a.m., as she reviewed motions in a securities fraud case, her phone buzzed across the desk. The name on the screen froze her hand midair. Richard. Her husband knew better than to call before a hearing. Still, she answered. His voice was trembling. Veronica, it's Claire. A pause, like a heartbeat that refused to continue. She's dead. The police found her in her apartment this morning. For a long moment, Veronica didn't move. The world around her dimmed. She heard only the low hum of the courthouse ventilation and the slow, heavy beat in her chest. What did you say? Claire's gone. The call ended, and the silence that followed was deafening. She stood in her chambers, staring at her reflection in the dark glass of the window. Unblinking, expressionless, the picture of control even as her world began to fracture. 40 minutes later, her black sedan pulled to a stop outside a quiet apartment complex in Brooklyn Heights. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the wind. Uniformed officers kept a small crowd of neighbors at bay, their faces pale and curious. To them, it was another tragedy. To her, it was family. When she approached, a young officer blocked her path. "Ma'am, this is a restricted scene." "I'm Judge Veronica Hale," she said sharply. "The victim is my stepdaughter." The officer hesitated, then stepped aside. "Detective Moore's upstairs, ma'am." The stairwell smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. On the second floor, a man in a gray suit turned as she entered. He was tall, mid-40s, with tired eyes and the kind of posture that belonged to someone who'd seen too much death to be surprised by it anymore. "Detective Nathan Moore, homicide," he said softly, flashing his badge. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Homicide," she repeated, her voice suddenly sharp. "You're saying this wasn't an accident?" "Too early to tell," Moore replied carefully. "But the circumstances are unusual." He led her into the apartment. It was neat, almost sterile. Textbooks, notes, half-finished cup of coffee on the desk. 2 wine glasses sat on the table, one empty, one untouched. And on the couch lay Claire Hale, 22, bright, ambitious, once full of promise. Her skin was pale as marble, her lips faintly blue. Veronica knelt beside her, every muscle in her face locked. "When did this happen?" "Between 8 and 11 last night," Moore said quietly. No sign of forced entry. No struggle. It could have been something in the wine. The word wine seemed to echo in the room. Veronica's eyes flicked briefly to the bottle, then back to Claire. "Who found her?" "A neighbor. Said Claire didn't show up for a meeting this morning. Used a spare key." Behind them, Richard sat slumped against the wall, face buried in his hands. When he saw his wife, he rose shakily. She went to him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder, her voice calm, measured, the way she'd spoken to nervous witnesses her whole career. "She should have moved in with us," Richard whispered. "I told her it wasn't safe living alone." Detective Moore watched them quietly, noting everything. The judge's composure, the absence of tears, the quick glance she gave the evidence markers. Something about her calm unsettled him. Most people in her position were inconsolable. She was in control. "Mrs. Hale?" he asked gently. Was Claire seeing anyone? Any recent changes in her behavior? Veronica's tone was even. She was focused on school. Law was her world. "I don't think she had time for anything else." Moore nodded, writing in his notebook, though his eyes never left her face. "And you and your husband were home all night?" "Yes," she replied. "Dinner at 8, paperwork until around 11. Then bed." The detective paused, just long enough for the tension to thicken. "Standard questions, Judge. We ask everyone close to the victim." "I understand," she said, her expression unreadable. An hour later, forensic technicians arrived. Cameras flashed. Labels were placed on every surface. Veronica, stood silently in the corner, her gaze locked on Claire's motionless body. "Detective," she said at last, her voice steady, "I expect to be kept informed of every step in this investigation." Moore nodded. "Of course, Your Honor. But I should warn you, cases like this tend to take unexpected turns." She met his eyes coldly. "Detective, I've been in law long enough to know surprises are rarely pleasant." As Moore watched her walk down the hallway, he couldn't shake the feeling that this woman, this icon of discipline and power, was holding something back. The polished heels clicked across the linoleum, fading into the distance, but the sound stayed with him. Outside, rain began to fall harder, tapping against the hood of Veronica's car as she sat behind the wheel. For the first time in decades, her hands trembled. She looked down at them, at the faint smear of makeup on her wrist, and whispered to herself, "Keep it together." In her world, truth was a weapon, and she had just stepped onto the battlefield. The next morning, the city was soaked in headlines. Law student found dead in Brooklyn apartment. A few lines in the article mentioned that the victim was the stepdaughter of federal judge Veronica Hale. The photo beside the text showed Veronica walking out of the building the night before, chin raised, expression hard. The media called her the Iron Lady of Justice. But Detective Nathan Moore wasn't interested in her reputation. He wanted answers. In the sterile glow of the precinct's conference room, he spread out the first batch of reports: toxicology, scene analysis, witness statements. The lab's preliminary findings were chilling. A rare toxin had been detected in Claire Hale's bloodstream. The compound was colorless, odorless, and nearly undetectable unless specifically tested for. The poison was fast-acting, killing within 30 minutes of ingestion. Rosa Alvarez, his partner, leaned over his shoulder. "That's not something you pick up at a corner store." "No," Nathan muttered. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. He flipped through photos of the apartment. 2 wine glasses, one used, one clean. No fingerprints except for Claire's, and an unidentified partial print too smudged for analysis. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, nothing missing. Whoever had been there, Claire had let them in willingly. She was poisoned, Nathan said quietly, and she trusted whoever did it. Rosa nodded. "Any leads on visitors?" "Neighbors said they saw her come home around 7:30 p.m. No one came in after that, at least not through the front." He sighed. "But the back stairwell doesn't have a camera." Rosa sipped her coffee. She was a law student, right? Columbia University. Top of her class, Nathan said, flipping open the victim profile. She lived alone. No boyfriend listed. No prior medical issues. He paused when his pen hit a note scribbled in the corner of the report. One of Claire's professors had mentioned she'd been working on a controversial research project. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Controversial how?" "Don't know yet," Rosa replied. "But her notebooks are full of case names. Maybe she stumbled onto something." Later that day, the detectives arrived at Claire's apartment for a second sweep. Forensics had cleared the scene, leaving the faint chemical tang of cleaning agents in the air. Rosa combed through the shelves of textbooks while Nathan crouched beside the desk, rifling through piles of handwritten notes. His fingers stopped on a line near the bottom of one page. "Cortez case, check the connection." He frowned. "Cortez, that name ring a bell?" Rosa glanced up. "Ryan Cortez. Financial fraud case 3 years ago. Convicted of embezzling $2 million from a hedge fund." "And who was the judge?" Rosa pulled out her phone, searching the online archives. Her eyes widened. "Veronica Hale." Nathan sat back slowly. "Her stepmother." He skimmed the case summary. Cortez had received only 2 years in prison, an unusually light sentence for that kind of money. The reasoning cited mitigating circumstances and lack of direct harm. Nathan's voice was low. She cut his sentence by more than half. Rosa frowned. Think the girl was digging into her stepmom's old rulings? Maybe. Maybe she found something she shouldn't have. They returned to the precinct as the rain started again, the streets turning to mirrors of gray. Nathan couldn't shake the unease in his chest. He'd seen plenty of powerful people try to bury scandal, but this felt deeper, colder. At his desk, he opened a new file, Case 24-310, the Hale homicide. He typed, Possible motive linked to Judge Hale's prior case. Ryan Cortez. Hey, Rosa said, approaching with a tablet. You might want to see this. I looked up Cortez. Got out of prison 8 months ago. Works for a non-profit now. New Beginnings, helps rehabilitate ex-cons. Guess who funds them? Nathan stared at the screen. The Justice Forward Foundation, which, Rosa continued, is chaired by Judge Veronica Hale. The room seemed to go still. Nathan exhaled slowly. That's a hell of a coincidence. Or not a coincidence at all, Rosa said quietly. Nathan rubbed his temples. So Claire digs into her stepmom's cases, finds out she gave a light sentence to a guy she's secretly funding, or maybe even seeing, and then she ends up dead. That's a pattern. Rosa hesitated. You think the judge is involved? He didn't answer right away. Through the glass window, rain streaked the city skyline. I think, he said finally, that the closer someone is to the law, the easier it gets for them to bend it. That evening, he called Columbia University. Professor Helen Coleman confirmed that Claire had been one of her brightest students, focused, disciplined, but lately distracted. She said she was researching judicial bias, the professor recalled, particularly in financial crime sentencing. Did she mention any specific judge? Nathan asked. There was a long pause on the line. She didn't name anyone, Coleman said, but I could tell she was nervous, like she'd found something that scared her. When Nathan hung up, Rosa was standing at the window. You know this isn't going to be easy. We're talking about a federal judge. You can't just knock on her door and ask if she killed her stepdaughter. Nathan gave a thin smile. Sure I can. He looked down at the file on his desk, the photograph of Veronica standing in that crime scene, her face carved from stone. Everyone looks innocent, he said, until the evidence starts talking. Outside, thunder rolled across the East River. The investigation had officially begun. 3 days after the autopsy confirmed poisoning, Detective Nathan Moore found himself once again inside Claire Hale's apartment, standing amid the silent traces of a life interrupted. The place looked almost too neat, like someone had tidied it after chaos. Her books remained alphabetized, her laptop sat closed, and a thin layer of dust had already begun to settle on the desk. Tech team finally cracked her computer, said Detective Rosa Alvarez, stepping in with a folder under her arm. Encrypted files, separate passwords, hidden directories. She was careful, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Nathan gestured for her to hand it over. What's in it? Rosa hesitated. You'd better see for yourself. At the precinct's digital forensics lab, the lights were dim and the hum of computers filled the space. A technician clicked open a folder labeled Truth, buried beneath several layers of encrypted code. The screen came alive with hundreds of files, documents, scanned court records, photographs, even voice memos. The first thing Nathan noticed was a series of case names typed in bold, each highlighted in yellow. One caught his eye immediately. United States versus Ryan Cortez. Run that, he said. The technician opened the file. Inside were screenshots of court transcripts, copies of sentencing memos, and what looked like a spreadsheet comparing sentences across similar financial crimes. Claire had been compiling data. In a red-margin note she'd written, Judge Hale's leniency inconsistent with federal guidelines. Must check link to defense attorney. Rosa let out a low whistle. She was investigating her own stepmother. Nathan's jaw tightened. And she found something. Scrolling through the folder, the technician clicked on another subfolder named Photos. Dozens of images appeared, taken from afar, zoomed in, grainy but unmistakable. In each, Judge Veronica Hale was seen with a man. Coffee shop patios, Central Park benches, the entrance of a boutique hotel. Sometimes they were talking closely. Sometimes they were holding hands. In one photo, they kissed. Rosa's voice dropped to a whisper. That's him, Ryan Cortez. Nathan leaned in. Date stamps. The technician checked. Most of them taken within the last 3 months. After his release from prison, Nathan muttered. She didn't just give him a second chance. She gave him herself. He rubbed his temples, the image of the poised federal judge fracturing into something darker. Claire must have discovered the affair while researching her paper. Rosa nodded grimly. And that's why she was scared. They kept scrolling until they reached the last image in the folder. It showed Veronica entering Claire's apartment building, time-stamped October 22nd, 8:11 p.m., the night Claire died. The room fell silent. Nathan exhaled slowly. Well, that's not just bad optics. That's probable cause. He turned to Rosa. Get this printed and backed up in triplicate. If this leaks before we're ready, every defense attorney in the state will bury us. Back at his desk, Nathan began piecing the story together on the whiteboard. Judge Hale, lenient sentencing in the Cortez case. Ryan Cortez, ex-convict turned nonprofit employee funded by Hale's foundation. Claire Hale, law student investigating judicial ethics, finds evidence of affair and corruption. Result: Claire dead from a poison that only someone with inside knowledge of evidence procedures could obtain. The logic was airtight. But logic wasn't evidence. Not in a courtroom. Rosa appeared beside him. I ran the metadata on those photos. They were taken on Claire's Canon camera, not her phone. Memory cards missing. Convenient, Nathan murmured. The killer probably took it, thinking that would erase everything. Didn't realize she backed up to her laptop. Rosa leaned against the desk, arms crossed. So what's next? We drag in a federal judge and accuse her of murder. Nathan looked up from the board, his expression cold and determined. Not yet. First we confirm where she was that night. Then we talk to Cortez. He paused, his eyes flicking to the photo of Veronica and Ryan outside the hotel. Her face, once calm and untouchable, looked almost human in the grainy frame. Caught mid-smile, unaware she was being watched. Claire gave us a map, he said quietly. We just have to follow where it leads. Rosa studied him. You think the judge knew she was being investigated? Nathan nodded. She's too smart not to notice. And if she did, she'd do anything to protect herself. He gathered the files and shoved them into an evidence envelope. Order a warrant for Veronica Hale's financials and her foundation records. Let's see how deep this hole goes. As he left the lab, he couldn't shake the image of Claire's careful handwriting. Each note precise, determined, like a daughter fighting the shadow of a woman who'd taught her that truth always prevails. What Claire never realized, Nathan thought bitterly, was that some people learn the law not to uphold it, but to hide behind it. The morning light slanted through the blinds of the precinct, casting thin bars of gold across Detective Nathan Moore's cluttered desk. The walls around him were plastered with photographs of Judge Veronica Hale and Ryan Cortez, the ex-convict she once sentenced and now, apparently, couldn't stay away from. Rosa Alvarez entered holding a paper cup of coffee and an expression that said she'd been up all night. I tracked Cortez's nonprofit, she said. New beginnings. Looks legit on the surface. Workshops, community outreach, job placement, but 80% of their funding comes from the Justice Forward Foundation. Guess who signs the checks? Nathan didn't look up. Veronica Hale. Bingo. He finally leaned back, rubbing his temples. She gives him a lenient sentence, pulls strings for his parole, and then hires him through her foundation. That's not charity, that's a cover. Rosa nodded. You think Claire found out about it? I think she found everything. By noon, Nathan was sitting in the glass-walled office of Ryan Cortez, inside the converted warehouse that served as headquarters for New Beginnings. The place was modern, minimal, and humming with the energy of young volunteers who believed they were saving souls. Cortez rose from behind his desk when Nathan flashed his badge. He was handsome in that calculated way, clean-cut, dark hair slicked back, wearing a fitted navy suit that said success story. His smile was disarming, his eyes sharp. Detective Moore, he said smoothly. What brings the NYPD to my humble corner of redemption? Nathan took in the framed photo of Cortez shaking hand with politicians, a wall of certificates for community leadership. You've done well for yourself, he said flatly. Almost too well for someone who spent 2 years in federal prison. Cortez chuckled. Some of us learn from our mistakes. Didn't hurt having a judge in your corner. The smile faltered for the briefest second. Excuse me? Judge Veronica Hale, Nathan continued. You remember her. She gave you half the time the prosecution wanted. Then she funded your organization. That's quite the coincidence. Cortez's tone cooled. If you're implying anything inappropriate, detective, I'd advise caution. The judge is a respected public servant, and I don't appreciate baseless insinuations. Nathan leaned forward. You've met with her multiple times since your release. Restaurants, parks, even hotels. We have photos. Cortez froze. For a moment, his mask slipped. You've been following me? No, Nathan said, eyes steady. But someone else did. He slid a photograph across the desk, one taken by Claire Hale. Veronica and Ryan sitting close together at a cafe, her hand on his arm. Cortez stared at the picture. Where did you get this? She's dead, Mr. Cortez, Nathan said quietly. Claire Hale. Found poisoned in her apartment. You two have anything to do with that? Cortez's face went pale, then hardened. I didn't even know her. Funny, Nathan said, because your foundation sent an email to her university 2 weeks ago. An invitation to intern. Cortez's jaw tightened. That was automated. Public outreach. Sure it was. Nathan stood. You know, it's strange how people keep dying around secrets. If I were you, I'd get ahead of this. I want my lawyer, Cortez said coldly. Good idea, Nathan replied. You're going to need one. Outside, Nathan watched through the glass as Cortez picked up his phone the moment he left. He wasn't calling a lawyer. That much was obvious. Within seconds, Rose's voice came over Nathan's earpiece. He's calling her. The judge. Follow him, Nathan said. Let's see where he runs. That evening, the surveillance team tailed Cortez through Manhattan traffic to a small Italian restaurant near Central Park called Bolano's, the kind of quiet place where people went to settle things off the record. From a parked sedan across the street, Nathan watched as Veronica Hale entered through the side door. She wasn't in her judicial robe now, just a gray coat, dark sunglasses, and tension carved into every movement. She joined Cortez at a table by the window. Through the glass, Nathan saw her voice rise, her gestures sharp. Cortez leaned forward, trying to calm her down, his hand brushing hers. She pulled away. Whatever they were saying, it wasn't about love anymore. After 20 tense minutes, Veronica stood up, threw her napkin on the table, and stormed toward the exit. Cortez followed her outside, pleading. They argued beside her black Mercedes. Then she said something that froze him where he stood. She got in her car and drove off, leaving him alone on the sidewalk. Rose's voice crackled in Nathan's ear. You got that? Every frame, he said, and it looked like a breakup. Or a panic, Rosa countered. She's spiraling. Nathan started the car. No, she's planning. Back at the precinct, the two detectives laid out the new timeline. Claire contacts her stepmother, threatening to expose her affair and misuse of foundation funds. Veronica meets Cortez multiple times over the next few days. On the night Claire dies, Veronica's car is caught by a traffic cam 2 blocks from the apartment. Cortez has an alibi at a charity dinner, but arranged by the very foundation she controls. Rosa stared at the whiteboard. You think she did it herself? Nathan's gaze was fixed on the photo of the judge at the restaurant. Her face lit by the soft glow of the chandelier, eyes burning with fury and fear. Yeah, he said. She's not the kind of woman who lets anyone else hold the knife. Outside, the city buzzed on, indifferent as always. But inside that precinct, Nathan Moore knew the story was shifting from a young woman's tragic death to a scandal that could shatter the justice system itself. And somewhere in the dark, Judge Veronica Hale was realizing that her secrets were no longer buried. They were being unearthed, one photograph at a time. By the next morning, the air in the precinct felt heavier, like everyone could sense a storm building. Detective Nathan Moore sat at his desk staring at the wall of evidence. Photos of Judge Veronica Hale and Ryan Cortez, the timeline of events, the lab report that screamed poison, and Claire's last email, we need to talk. Every thread led to the same conclusion, but Nathan knew what he was walking into. When the person sitting in the suspect chair wears a federal robe, justice doesn't move, it trembles. At 9 a.m., Nathan was summoned to the DA's office. District Attorney Alan Pierce, a man with silver hair and a politician's smile, stood by the window overlooking Manhattan, hands clasped behind his back. Captain Leonard Brown was already there, expression tense. Detective Moore, Pierce began, his voice smooth as glass. You've been running quite the investigation. Care to explain why I'm hearing about it from the press before I hear it from you? Nathan frowned. With respect, sir, I've kept this internal. If the media knows anything, it's not from my team. Pierce turned, his eyes sharp. You're investigating a sitting federal judge. That's not a case. That's a political earthquake. You think you can drag the Southern District's most respected woman through the mud without consequences? Nathan didn't blink. Her stepdaughter was poisoned, sir. The evidence points to her. I don't care how shiny her resume is. Captain Brown sighed, stepping in. Nathan, the DA's saying we need to tread carefully. You're talking about someone with deep ties, federal, state, financial. If you push too hard without airtight evidence, you'll blow the whole thing. So we do nothing? Nathan shot back. Pretend the poison doesn't exist? Pretend the car wasn't caught 2 blocks from the victim's apartment? Pierce's tone hardened. What you'll do is wait for my authorization before another word leaves your mouth about Judge Hale. Is that clear? Nathan clenched his jaw. Crystal. When he left the office, Rosa was waiting in the hallway, holding a folder like it might burn her fingers. You got chewed out, she guessed. Pierce wants me to stop digging. She exhaled. So we keep digging. Nathan gave a half smile. Exactly. Back at their desks, Rosa opened the folder. Financial records from Justice Forward Foundation. Look at these transfers. Nathan scanned the pages, several large deposits from anonymous donors, funneled into the foundation, then transferred directly to New Beginnings, the nonprofit where Cortez worked. $500,000 in 18 months, Nathan said. All routed through shell charities. That's money laundering, plain and simple. And look at the signature on the approval forms, Rosa added, tapping the page. Veronica Hale. Nathan leaned back, rubbing his face. She wasn't just helping him start over. She was bankrolling him. The realization hit like ice water. Claire had uncovered this. That's why she'd written, check the connection. And it's why she died. Rosa's phone buzzed, an unknown number. She picked up, listened for a few seconds, and her expression darkened. Captain says the judge called the DA personally. She's accusing us of harassment. Nathan smirked bitterly. Of course she is. She's using the same system she swore to protect. He looked out the window at the rain starting to fall over the city. You know what's funny? Everyone thinks power protects them. It doesn't. It just makes the fall louder. That night, in the glow of the evidence board, the 2 detectives reviewed traffic camera footage again. On screen, a silver Mercedes-Benz appeared at 8:14 p.m. near Claire Hale's building. The license plate traced back to the Hale household. Rosa zoomed in. That's her backup car, right? The one Richard Hale usually drives. Yeah, Nathan said. And guess who was home that night? Not him. Nathan nodded grimly. He was at a company dinner across town. We have security footage. That means Veronica had the car. For a moment, the 2 detectives just stared at the frozen image on the monitor, the headlights glinting in the dark, the timestamp ticking forward, sealing a federal judge's fate one frame at a time. You realize what this means? Rosa said softly. If we move forward, we're not just arresting a judge. We're taking on everyone who protects her. Nathan's voice was steady. Then we'd better not miss. He took a marker and drew one thick line across the board, connecting every name. Veronica Hale. Ryan Cortez. Justice Forward Foundation. New Beginnings. Claire Hale. Underneath, he wrote one word in red ink. Motive. As the clock ticked past midnight, the precinct fell quiet, save for the hum of the vending machine and the rain outside. Nathan stared at the board, at the smiling face of the judge who'd built her life on control, and whispered, almost to himself, she spent her whole career preaching justice. Let's see how she handles the real thing. Outside, thunder rolled low over the East River. Somewhere uptown, Judge Veronica Hale was already making phone calls, powerful ones. And for the first time in her life, the law she'd mastered was starting to turn against her. The next morning, the storm that had hovered over New York finally broke. Sheets of rain blurred the city skyline as Detective Nathan Moore and Rosa Alvarez sat in the dim interrogation room, the fluorescent light buzzing above them. On the table lay a neat stack of photographs, a flash drive, and a single printed email. We need to talk. I know everything. It was time. The door opened, and Judge Veronica Hale entered. the same woman who'd once commanded packed courtrooms and silenced lawyers with a glance. Today, she wore a charcoal gray suit, pearls at her throat, and an expression carved from ice. Behind her, an attorney in a blue tie carried a leather briefcase and the kind of arrogance only expensive retainer fees could buy. Detective Moore, she greeted calmly, her tone devoid of warmth. "You wanted to speak with me?" Nathan rose, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Appreciate you coming in, Your Honor." "I wasn't given much choice," she replied, sitting. "My office received word that you've been making inappropriate inquiries into my personal affairs." Nathan kept his voice steady. "Our inquiries are into the death of Claire Hale, and your personal affairs happen to overlap with that investigation." Her lawyer, Mr. Grayson, interjected smoothly. "My client is here voluntarily. She'll answer relevant questions, but won't entertain baseless speculation." Nathan nodded. "Fair enough. Let's stick to relevance, then." He opened the folder and laid out the first photo. Veronica and Ryan Cortez outside Bolano's restaurant, their hands clasped across the table. "Recognize him?" She barely blinked. "Yes, that's Mr. Cortez. He runs a nonprofit my foundation supports." "Supports," Nathan repeated. "Interesting word. You mean the same nonprofit that's received over $500,000 from your foundation in the past year?" Veronica's lips curved faintly. "I donate to rehabilitation programs, Detective. It's part of my duty to help former offenders re-enter society." Rosa slid another photo across the table, this one of Veronica and Cortez entering a hotel lobby at midnight. "And does that include after-hours rehabilitation?" The lawyer's chair creaked. "Detective, you're implying an affair without proof." Nathan smiled thinly. "Actually, we have proof. Photographs taken by your stepdaughter. She'd been investigating the Cortez case for a university paper on judicial ethics." For the first time, a flicker of movement crossed Veronica's face, a tightening around the eyes, a subtle shift in posture. But her voice remained even. Claire had an active imagination. She was prone to dramatics. "Funny," Nathan said, leaning forward, "because she sent you an email the night she died saying, 'I know everything.' Then, hours later, you were seen near a building. Your backup Mercedes was caught on a traffic camera at 8:14 p.m. Her lawyer shot up. Coincidence? She could have lent the car to anyone." Rosa cut in, calm but sharp. "Your husband was verified at a dinner across town, Your Honor. So, unless you're suggesting a phantom took your car, it's safe to say that was you." Veronica's smile returned, thin and brittle. "Detective, do you have any idea how absurd this sounds? I went for a drive that evening. That isn't a crime." "No," Nathan said, "but what you did afterward might be." He nodded toward Rosa, who pressed play on a small recorder. A voice filled the room. Ryan Cortez, during his interrogation the day before. She panicked. Said the girl had pictures, files, she was going to ruin everything. "I told her to come clean. She said she'd handle it." The air in the room seemed to vanish. The lawyer stood. "That's hearsay. My client has nothing to do with this." Nathan cut him off. "Mr. Cortez has also handed us a flash drive with financial records showing direct transfers from your personal accounts to his. Over $90,000. Care to explain that?" For a heartbeat, the mask cracked. Veronica's eyes darted to the photos on the table. The evidence of her downfall laid out in front of her like a courtroom exhibit. Then she inhaled slowly and composed herself. "Detective," she said, her voice silky again, "I have nothing to hide. Claire's death is a tragedy, but I suggest you spend your time finding her real killer instead of chasing conspiracies." Nathan leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Then he said, almost casually, "We will. Once we finish testing the fingerprints on the wine glass you shared with her." Her composure faltered again, just for a second. A single tremor ran through her hand. She clasped in her lap quickly, but not quickly enough. "Wine," she repeated softly. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Nathan said, standing. "But the lab's working overtime. And if the prints match yours, I'll be the one reading you your rights." Veronica's lawyer gathered his papers, bristling. "This interview is over." Nathan nodded toward the door. "Of course. Thank you for your time, Your Honor." As she stood, Veronica met his gaze for the first time without pretense. There was no arrogance now, only calculation and something colder beneath it. "Detective," she said quietly, "be careful where you step. The higher the ladder, the harder the fall." Nathan held her stare. "Then you'd better hold on tight." When the door closed behind her, Rosa exhaled. "You think she cracked?" Nathan stared at the trembling reflection in the one-way mirror. "No," he said, "but she's close." Outside, thunder rolled over the city again. Somewhere in her Upper East Side penthouse, Judge Veronica Hale poured herself another glass of wine and realized that for the first time in her life, the law wasn't her shield. It was her trap. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It came down in relentless waves that turned New York into a maze of reflections, streetlights bleeding into puddles, sirens echoing off wet glass. Detective Nathan Moore hadn't slept. Every hour since the interrogation, his gut told him the same thing. Judge Veronica Hale was guilty, but she wasn't ready to admit it yet. That would change tonight. When the lab results finally came in, Rosa found him at his desk. Her hair was damp, eyes sharp. "The prints came back," she said, dropping a folder in front of him. "The clean wine glass? Her fingerprints, right on the rim." Nathan flipped through the report. "So she poured herself a drink while her stepdaughter died?" Rosa shook her head. "No. The prints overlap with Claire's on the same glass. They shared it." Nathan looked up, realization dawning. She toasted her. "A peace offering. Or a setup," Rosa said quietly. That was all they needed. By dusk, Veronica Hale was back at the precinct, this time not voluntarily. Her lawyer wasn't allowed inside yet. The DA had signed the warrant himself after seeing the lab results. When she stepped into the interrogation room, gone was the calm, polished authority of a federal judge. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. Still, her voice carried the same steady weight. "You think you've won," she said, "but all you have are assumptions." Nathan didn't reply. He opened a folder and slid the lab report across the table. "That's your fingerprint on the glass, Your Honor. The same glass that contained traces of tetrodotoxin, the same poison found in Claire's bloodstream. You handled the evidence yourself." For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes flicked down to the paper, then back up. "That toxin was stored in an evidence locker from a smuggling case 5 years ago," she said, voice low. "Are you suggesting I broke into my own courthouse to steal it?" Nathan's tone didn't change. "No, I'm suggesting you never returned it." Her hands, folded neatly on the table, trembled. She withdrew them, clasping them beneath her arms instead. He continued, quieter now, almost gentle. "Claire found out about your relationship with Ryan Cortez. She found the money trail. She emailed you that night, told you to come over to explain yourself." Veronica's gaze was unreadable. "You brought a bottle of her favorite wine," Nathan said. "Something to smooth it over. You wanted to talk, maybe even scare her a little. But when she threatened to expose you, you panicked. You poured the wine. You poisoned her." Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, the judge seemed human, frightened, fragile. Rosa leaned forward. "She trusted you, Veronica. You were supposed to protect her. That cracked something." Veronica's shoulders stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the mirrored wall, the weight of her own reflection pressing back at her. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then make me understand," Nathan said. There was a long silence. Only the rain filled the void, drumming against the windows. Then Veronica exhaled, a sharp, trembling breath, and the story began to spill. She wasn't supposed to die. Nathan didn't interrupt. "I went there because she emailed me. I thought she'd found out about Ryan, about the foundation money. I was terrified she'd tell Richard, or worse, the commission. You don't know what it's like to live your entire life building something. Your name, your reputation, just to have a 22-year-old tear it down in a single sentence." Her voice broke, then hardened again. "I brought wine. I told myself it was just a talk, to make her understand. But she wouldn't stop accusing me, calling me corrupt, a fraud. She said she was going to the press. I couldn't let her destroy everything." She looked at Nathan now, eyes glistening with tears she'd fought for decades. "I still had that vial from an old case. I kept it in a sealed drawer in Chambers, God knows why. I thought a few drops would just make her sick, shake her up enough to scare her silent. But she started convulsing. I panicked. I tried to help her, but she was already gone. The words fell heavy, each one cracking the air between them. Rosa's pen stopped moving halfway through her notes. Veronica continued, her tone now detached, almost clinical, like she was giving testimony in someone else's trial. I wiped the glasses, cleaned the counter, took her phone. I thought, if it looked like an accident, maybe they just closed the case. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. Nathan studied her. You covered your tracks too well for an accident. I've spent my life writing rulings, detective. I know how cases fall apart. She gave a hollow laugh. I just never thought I'd be the one sitting on the other side of the table. The door opened behind them. D.A. Pierce stepped in, his face drawn tight. He said nothing for a long moment, then placed a recorder on the table. Judge Veronica Hale, he said formally, you are under arrest for the murder of Claire Hale. Veronica didn't flinch. She looked down at her trembling hands, then up at Nathan. Tell Richard, tell him I loved her, even when she hated me. Nathan's voice was low. He'll hear the truth, Your Honor. Every word of it. As Rosa read her the Miranda rights, Veronica stood slowly, straightening her coat with the last remnants of dignity she could gather. When she spoke, her tone carried the echo of every sentence she'd ever handed down. Everything I've ever done was for justice, she said quietly. But justice doesn't forgive. 2 officers led her out of the room. The sound of her heels clicking down the hallway echoed like a gavel strike. The final verdict in a courtroom she could no longer control. Rosa closed the file gently. She really thought she could manage it, didn't she? Nathan stared at the door. She spent her whole life bending the law to her will. It was only a matter of time before it bent back. Outside, the rain finally eased into silence. Somewhere downtown, the first reporters were already preparing the story that would shake the city's faith in its own courts. And for the first time since the case began, Nathan felt no satisfaction, only the heavy, inevitable weight of truth. Justice had come full circle. The morning of the trial arrived like a slow-moving storm. The courthouse, once Judge Veronica Hale's kingdom, was now the stage for her reckoning. Cameras crowded the marble steps, reporters jostling for a glimpse of the fallen icon. Once hailed as the Iron Lady of Justice, Veronica now stood accused of poisoning her own stepdaughter to conceal an affair with a convicted felon. Inside, the corridors buzzed with whispers. Every attorney, clerk, and bailiff who'd once bowed to her authority now avoided her gaze. Her face, pale but proud, betrayed no emotion as she was led through security in a plain navy suit instead of her signature black robe. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Detective Nathan Moore stood in the gallery, arms crossed, watching. He had testified 2 days earlier, recounting every step of the investigation. The poison, the financial records, the car footage, the confrontation. Now, as he watched her take her seat at the defense table, he felt no triumph, just the weight of inevitability. At the prosecutor's table sat District Attorney Alan Pierce, a man who once protected Veronica's reputation. Now, under the blinding scrutiny of the media, he had no choice but to deliver the truth. The law, he began in his opening statement, is only as strong as those who uphold it. And when the one sworn to protect justice becomes its violator, the entire system trembles. The courtroom was silent. When Veronica finally took the stand, her voice was calm, deliberate, the same measured tone she had used for years to hand down sentences. I made mistakes, she said, eyes fixed on the jury. I let my emotions cloud my judgment. But I did not plan to kill Claire Hale. What happened that night was not an act of malice. It was a moment of weakness, an accident born from fear. Pierce rose, holding a photo of Claire. Fear doesn't explain pouring poison into a glass, Your Honor. It explains panic. But poison is preparation. Veronica didn't look at the picture. I was desperate, she said softly. You spend 30 years building a reputation in this system, and you realize one rumor can destroy you overnight. I acted out of fear and shame. The jury watched closely, some with pity, others with disgust. When the defense rested, The courtroom waited for the verdict in tense silence. 2 days later, the foreman rose, hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Judge Veronica Hale, guilty of second-degree murder." A collective gasp filled the room. Veronica closed her eyes for a moment. No tears, no outburst, only the quiet surrender of someone who had known this ending long before the words were spoken. At sentencing, the judge presiding, a man who had once clerked under Veronica, read from the bench with visible discomfort. "For the crime of second-degree murder, this court sentences you to 25 years to life at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility." A hush fell. Veronica stood, her voice trembling slightly as she addressed the court for the last time. "I believed justice was blind. I told myself that meant fairness. But I see now, it also means indifference. Justice doesn't care who you are, what title you hold, or how many people you've sentenced. It comes for everyone, eventually." She looked toward Nathan in the gallery, her eyes hollow but clear. "Detective Moore, do me one favor. Don't let her name, Claire's name, be buried beneath mine. She deserves better." Nathan nodded once. "She'll get it." When they led her away, the flashbulbs outside exploded like gunfire. Every headline the next morning screamed her downfall. Judge who preached justice now faces it. Federal judge sentenced for murdering stepdaughter. Poison and power. The fall of Veronica Hale. Months passed. The city moved on, but the case left a scar on its conscience. Nathan closed the Hale file, locking it in the cold archives of the 23rd Precinct. Yet he couldn't shake the image of the woman who'd once ruled from the bench with iron certainty, now reduced to a prisoner number, eating from a tin tray behind barbed wire. One gray afternoon, a letter arrived at the precinct. No return address, just his name scrawled in deliberate handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Detective Moore, you were right. Power doesn't protect, it isolates. I thought I could bend justice, but I only broke myself. Tell Richard I'm sorry. Tell Claire I see her face every time I close my eyes. VH." Nathan folded the letter and stared out the window. Rain again. It always seemed to rain when a story like this ended. That evening, he visited Claire Hale's grave, a simple white headstone tucked beneath an elm in Greenwood Cemetery. Beside it was a bouquet, fresh, bright, and simple. He didn't have to ask who had left it. Somewhere, behind prison walls, Veronica Hale still remembered the girl she'd silenced. Rosa joined him, hands in her pockets. "You ever think people like her believe they're untouchable because they wear the robe?" Nathan nodded slowly. "They forget that justice wears it too." The wind stirred, scattering a few petals across the grass. The city's hum carried faintly through the trees. Nathan took one last look at the grave, then turned to leave. "Come on," he said quietly. "There's always another case." As they walked away, the camera of the mind might linger on the headstone, on the name Claire Hale, 2001 to 2023, and the faint echo of a woman's voice carried by the wind, the one who had once ruled over life and death. Justice isn't blind. It's patient. And in that final irony lay the heart of the story. How a woman who believed she was the law became its lesson.